Hello and welcome to Uncovered, the podcast with your host, Jason Irving. Join me in a journey to understand what's truly happening in your world and the world around you. This is not about how you're living life on the surface. It's about what's truly driving you from under the covers. I'm going to take you on a journey to deeply uncover the reason why you are here, the ultimate purpose in your problems and the way that they have shaped your life up until now. See, I believe you have a purpose, and your problems are the highway towards ultimate realization of that journey towards freedom and the reconnection of your true self. I've been told I have a different spin on most things, and I'll be giving you my understanding of life, love, and what we're all here for, purpose. To get the best out of this podcast, drop what you already know so you can discover what's beyond you. So join me, let's play this game of life and bring on liberation, transformation, and change. Let's do this.
Hi Jason, how are you today?
Yeah, very well. How are you?
I'm good too, thank you.
So we're on the communication part of the leadership model, and this is probably the most important part of how we do communicate in a really healthy way as a leader. So most people are faking it while they're communicating to others. Unfortunately, we don't share what's really going on when we're talking about what's going on in our world. So how do we communicate in a way that's actually not pouring all our shit on everybody while we're communicating what's really important as a leader, so we actually feel like there's no separation between us and the people that we're leading.
And how do we do that?
Look, I think the biggest challenge that people face is the fear of being rejected. So we have to actually let go of a couple of things. First and foremost is that fear of getting rejected and the fear of being liked. And then we've got the flip side, which is the authoritarian way of communicating, where you don't give a crap about whether you're being liked or rejected, right? So this is where it can be really, really difficult to know. This is why a lot of really nice people don't know how to communicate well, because they see people who are AAA grade arseholes who don't care so much, and they think they're going to be like them.
Yeah.
So it's a big challenge to know how to communicate in a way where you're caring and loving while you're also detached about how people are going to feel about you as a person. Because leaders, I know from working in the academy or working as a leader for the academy, I look and I know that no matter what I say, someone's going to get upset with me about something.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not my intention to upset people. It's just what people do. Because we're doing personal development and people take things personally.
Yeah.
It's called personal development for a reason. So as a leader in this space, it's challenging because I have to call out some of the stuff that people are stuck with. And sometimes the stuff that I say is not necessarily the thing that you really want to hear, right?
Yeah, no.
So how do you communicate in an elegant way some of the tougher things that people need to hear to get them sorted and over the line in their world?
And I think you're really good at really communicating elegantly and saying the things people are ready to hear at the right time in the right way, so that they can actually are able to change and don't get overwhelmed by it, or don't, of course sometimes they get upset at you, but they do understand what you mean. So you do that, you model that really well.
And
how to do that. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I don't feel like I do. I think I think sometimes I'm still trying to get it right. I think I've evolved myself over a period of time as a leader. When I was a therapist, it was a lot easier because you just have another person that you'd be chatting to, and you'd be leading them in a way that was one-to-one based, so you could be more personal in the way that you're approaching your communication with people specifically. Now, as a leader, when you're sharing in a group, especially in personal development, how do you make the communication sound like it's also has meaning for everybody? That's challenging.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a lot of skill to be able to make it feel like everyone is hearing information that makes sense and matters to them in a leadership way. And that's what really good leaders do. You know, you get people who lead a tribe of people, and you listen to what they've got to say, and everyone's like, oh my God, that just made so much sense and hits people in the right areas.
And I think there's always like something for everyone and what we talk about. Like every time we have a class or something, you ask at the end, like, oh, what did you get out of this? And then you can see all the different responses of people, like what the main message for them was. So it's quite interesting to see the differences, and obviously that then reflects back to where they are at in their life. Yeah,
and I think there's so many ways to communicate, and I'm going to hand one thing that's really, really important is silent communication. Is sometimes not saying something when you know something is probably the healthiest thing to do. Timing, and knowing when that timing is meant to be there, because the communication that we are meant to supply, sometimes we can deliver something that someone's not ready for, and they won't be able to handle that information in any way other than bad. Right?
For sure.
So communication has to come in a way that makes the receiver feel like they can trust you. And if they can't, then you've misfired on that communication. Especially, I have conversations with people all the time about joining the academy. And one of the first things that you do when you're actually having a conversation with someone, for me anyways, I don't have an arm twist sales call. I have a conversation to see if they're the right fit and whether it's going to work for them or not, working with us. So I've got to communicate in an elegant way what I see is going on for them in a way that's actually going to make them feel like they're safe, and also make them feel like the academy can help them grow. So there's so many ways that I've got to have that communication really leveled that someone's going to say, hey, I think this is right for me. Yeah.
And then also, not telling them everything that you see at that time. Obviously, you'll see a lot already. I think if you had told me, like, the first time, I came to see you, if you had told me everything that you've told me by now, you would have never seen me again, right?
No, that's right. And sometimes oversharing with people is not necessarily the healthiest way of approaching with human nature, is that, we all have pain in our insides, and if someone just keeps poking the pain out, there's a problem. And I know from a personal development perspective, I think this is really important to understand what to do and how to do it well, because if all you're doing is poking pain out without showing people the brilliance, there's a problem. If you're showing people just the brilliance without poking the pain, there's a problem. So there's a really fine line between getting this right and going over the line. And I know from me personally, people have told me that I've gone too far with them. And you're not going to get it right as a leader every time. And even when I'm sharing in a group, people say, oh, that was too much. And some people, then I'm talking to someone else, that was the best one you've ever done. Same thing, complete hurt, best one you've ever done. So where do you win as a leader? You don't.
You don't. Yeah.
Right? Because as a leader, you're going to be processed on, and people are going to judge you more when you're standing out from the crowd than you are in the crowd, because you're blended. So when you've got a level of communication that you've got to display yourself in an environment where people, one of the biggest things that people are frightened of is feeling humiliated in a group. And then how do you communicate to someone elegantly that in a group that they need to learn how to do something differently? So people may take it the wrong way, or they may take it a beautiful way. It really depends on the person and what's going on for them. So I think, how do we be wise in our communication levels as a leader? Well, I don't know. I think if you look at the first two, we're looking at modelling behaviour and courage. These are the podcasts that we've had before this in the leadership model. If you've got the courage to stand out, you're modelling behaviour appropriately, then you're communicating. You're backing yourself by your words, by your actions, sorry. and people trust that you are going to be safe and secure in an environment with you if they know that you're following through and you're doing the right thing and you're taking good care of yourself, and you're doing the right level of communication. You're showing that through an integral way through modelling behaviour. Then it's easy to communicate. I think the hardest thing is that when you're telling someone something as a leader and you're doing the complete opposite in your life.
Yeah, so that comes back to modelling behaviour again.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So it's like walking the talk. So if you're walking the talk, then it's much easier for that communication to be a lot easier for you to digest and for other people to digest. This is why we're going to be talking about this in our next podcast, which is emotional connection. If you are able to model your behaviour appropriately, you've got the courage to be what you need to be, and you're communicating really well, then you're not going to have this emotional pressure behind you after you've had a conversation with someone. Right? Because if you're not being truthful, or you're not being transparent, you're not able to walk your dialogue, then of course there's going to be emotional shame. There's going to be emotional discord happening between you and another person. There's not going to be a safety. So as a leader, you've got to know how to communicate in all sorts of different tones as well. You can't just do one tone, right?
Yeah, I do notice that with you for sure. Like how you have different tones depending on the topic that we talk about as well, and what the point is of the thing. And when we were in year 2, which was more about taking personal responsibility and empowering yourself, the tone was more like much stronger.
Yeah.
And then in year 1, which was a bit more compassionate and
That's right.
Yeah,
and you've got to learn to be able to do that. It's a skill to be able to know to read a room as a leader, and to lead one-to-one as well. You've got to know what sort of tone the room requires or a person requires to know what to do in that area. So there'll be times where I've been really, really serious, and just before I would just be about to do a class, and then I just clown around for the first 10 minutes because the room's just needs lightness. So I just bring light to the room because it needs it, right? Or in a Zoom room, you can feel it. It doesn't. People, you don't have to. Because I'm so sensitive, I can feel what the environment needs, or the content needs. Right, so if we're talking about something that needs a bit of lightness, we need to be able to shift our tone, and this is not necessarily what a lot of leaders can do. A lot of leaders can be really monotone in the way that they approach, so they don't actually know how to register their language up and down. And to make sure that you do that as a leader, you're inviting everybody in.
It's really beautiful. I think that kind of refers almost back to that podcast that we did, the less prep, more you. So less preparation, which makes you then less rigid and allows you to be able to, be more of you and read the room more, and, bring that in rather than being like, oh, I prepared it like this, I'll do it like that, but just being more adaptive.
That's right, especially if you're in a new environment and you don't know what to do, right? You've just jumped into an environment where, let's say you've just walked in a room and everyone's been fighting. Are you going to just muck around, or what are you going to do for that situation? And how are you going to make sure that you can do it in a way that's going to be supportive of everyone? Because communication has to come in a balanced way, and it needs to get the point of view across in a really, really healthy way as a leader. You can't just be nice to everyone, as an example. Oh yeah, everything's going to be good. Don't worry, we're all going to go broke next month, but everything's going to be good. Don't worry, everything will be fine. And then everyone loses their jobs, right? So, you've got to be able to be really clear around, around what this is all going to look like when we're communicating and getting our points of view across in the world. Because tough conversations require maturity on the leader's part. And what do? right? What do you do when someone is so off base when they're talking to you, and you're the leader, and they're so out of balance? And I had someone doing this with me last week, and I'm so out of balance with what she was talking about, and I'm sitting there just going, well, do I give a heave-ho? You know, what do I do in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Right? A good leader should be able to have choice, right? And a lot of the time, if people are not able to receive feedback, they can just be cranky just because of the person not having any context. And a lot of people don't have any context. You know, if you're not leading something like I'm doing, it's so easy to be negative towards the leader and say, oh, he's not doing this, he's not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But try do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's what I said when I started working here, right? Before I started working here, I used to sometimes think like, oh, this meditation isn't cut out. Like, where is it? Why is it not there? Or something. And now I'm like, oh, I understand why you didn't have time to cut out every single meditation of each class, because it just, you just have so many things on that would just be like another thing. And, it was more like just pop the class on. And it was just, when I saw your calendar, I'm like, fair enough, you didn't do that. And then you get that understanding from the other end. But when you're not in that situation, it's easy to say like, oh, why didn't he do that?
No, that's right. And it's interesting. I think one of the things that I've struggled with my communication is the breaks. It's like people expect me to be here all the time because I run an academy.
Mm-hmm.
But where's my life?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but then if I ask someone who's in the academy, hey, I was too busy. I'm like, but if it's the other way around, they're expectant,
mm-hmm.
right? And this is what can happen from a leadership perspective, is that I used to help people move from different levels of organisations or different levels in corporate,
mm-hmm.
and in the public service in Canberra, and what's expected as a leader, the higher you go, the more you have to work and the less time you have with your family.
Mm.
That's a big mistake, right? So leaders have got to know how to create a really, really good balance in all areas, because it can be expected, especially as a business owner. A lot of business owners don't give themselves the time to have balance in their world, and they can be thinking in their head their business while they're hanging out with their kids or their wife or husband, and they're not really there.
I read something really interesting about that today, especially that was more about like people working in organizations, and saying that if you died today, your job that you're currently doing would probably be advertised by the end of the week, but your family, they won't forget you for a very long time. So, make sure that you don't just spend all your time at work, but be with your family too.
Well, I think that's a really important part, is that the leadership model is not just about how you're leading people, how you're doing your purpose and all of that. What you said right there is paramount. If you're not leading well at home, then what you're doing in the workplace, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
What's the point in it all? I know a lot of people, I did all of this for you, but I didn't see you.
Mm-hmm.
As a person, you weren't around, or when you were around, you weren't around.
Mm-hmm.
I can be susceptible to that. Sometimes I feel like I haven't been really truly there with my kids sometimes, because I'm thinking about our business and what it's doing, and what I've got to do to keep it going. And that can be a real challenge as a person creating something very unique. And I know there have been times where I've fallen down as a parent, fallen down as a husband, even though Anya works in the business. There's got to be a separation
mm-hmm.
between all the layers and all the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it can be quite difficult. Like if I have friends who are part of our academy, sometimes that can cross over. Oh yeah, can I just ask you this question?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, if someone does that in that environment, that can mean, oh, okay, they're not really my friend. They just want to use me, and they just want to have more time with me in a social setting, but they just actually want to have more time. So as a leader, I've just got to say, no,
Yeah.
you know,
This is not the right
this
environment.
is not the right environment for that, and that's what we've got to understand. There's a guy that spoke about this, especially in the communication levels. He said it's called situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at a situation that you need to provide a certain level of communication, you have to see what the situation requires so you can communicate in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I was taking Charlotte yesterday bike riding, and she's trying to learn to stop. So she gets on. She when she's braking, she tries to get off the bike and run off the bike. She falls over.
Oh dear.
I kept trying to get her to stop and show her what she needed to do, and she started to cry. And I was like, need to keep her getting on going. So I gave her a hug, get back on the bike. And I knew if I enabled her too much, she wouldn't have actually repeated and tried. And it was a real challenge to know how to make sure that I wasn't being too hard on her. And then I asked her at the end, was Daddy too hard on you? She said, yeah. And I said, I'm really sorry. I just didn't want you to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a challenge. I didn't get it right as a leader for her as a parent, but I asked.
Yeah, and that makes a difference already.
Yeah, and as a leader, you're not going to be able to get it right all the time in every area of your life. But if you're not asking for feedback and you're not willing to take the feedback on, I wouldn't have given. Excuse me. I wouldn't have given her the space to be able to communicate what was happening. She could have covered over those feelings the next time we got on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next time we jump on to say, how are you feeling, Jazz? Charlotte, are you ready to, that's my oldest daughter, are you ready to give this a shot today and to push through those barriers? Because we're all going to have them. And Charlotte's amazing. She's got a really high level of communication. Her teachers have said that, really emotionally mature as a 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. So you can have good conversations with her that are far more intelligible than a lot of 6-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So to work with her emotionally and communication wise, it's a lot easier than doing that with my son Liam.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have particular areas where we don't lead very well in communication. I struggle with authoritarian leadership. That's why I have a leadership model that I do now. Mm-hmm. I don't like forcing people and telling people how they should do what they do, even though I say, if you follow my guidance, you're going to get a better life. Mm-hmm. But I don't get cranky with people for not taking notice. Mm-hmm. And I don't put a fear through everybody or blowtorch through everybody when they're doing, in quotes, the wrong thing, because they don't know. So I think it's really important how we communicate in a mature way. And there's 3 levels of communication, listeners. One is the child state communication, where you haven't grown up. And I don't know what the book is. Anya was telling me about this book that she was reading about the age level that people communicate from based on trauma. So you could actually, from particular instances, communicate from a 6-year-old because you haven't healed that part of you. And when people are talking from a child state perspective, what age are they communicating from? Right? And then you've got the adult style of communication, where you can either be a know-it-all, arrogant, this is the way it is, or you can be an open communicator where you're learning and growing. And that's a challenge. And then you've got the wise communicators, and the wise communicators have a lot more choice. They have the ability to be silent. Like I said earlier, they know when to be silent and not to say anything. And they know when to communicate with different tones and how to communicate in certain areas in certain ways to get the best result out of people. And those 3 levels, if you stay in the child state, you're never going to get anywhere with your communication. And when you're working with someone who's staying a child, you can't help them. Right, there's some people that I've had to really help grow up in the academy because they're just childish, and it's because of the patterning and the pain that they've had in their childhood, so they haven't been able to grow up. And then when you hit that point, you're able to communicate that, then you try and get them up into the adult phase and get them moving to what they want to do in life. And then the wise phase, unfortunately, guys, or fortunately, it really depends on. Some people have it when they were born with it. It does come with a few wrinkles. So when I think about what I was like when I was in my 20s, Filia, and you're in your 20s now, my level of communication is nothing like it is now. And I'm turning 50 in 2 days. So I know my levels of communication have just massively upgraded. In my 30s, they were better. In my 30s, I was actually doing a lot of personal development, so I was working on a lot of child stuff. In my 30s, in my 40s, I've done better. In the last 3 years, I've really lifted my game communication-wise.
Running the academy. And
yeah, because it's put myself in a different style of leadership, which is leading people. So leading is in all different ways. You lead yourself in an individual way, walking down the street, going to the shops, all of those sorts of things, and then leading people is a whole nother world. And so I'm hoping that as I get better at this over the next 10 years as a leader, I will be able to lead in a far better way than I have before.
And what's like some advice that you would give people to work on their communication and improve their communication? Is it more like working through their trauma? And
yeah, I think it's understanding, having understanding of where they're communicating from and what they're communicating there about and what's really going on with their communication. Because there's a thing called reading between the lines, right? When you read a book, there's reading between the lines with communication as well. It's in the gaps. It's in the body language even. Yeah. So they show statistically that 10% of your communication gets across in a book. Written communication is about 10%. And then the verbal, I think, is about 30 or 40. And then you have most of it is your body language. Right? So how you are displaying yourself and how you're looking and the way that you're communicating doesn't just come from something written. It's very, very easily miscued to actually have someone write a book and for people to interpret exactly the way that the writer has actually written it.
And it's interesting as well, like when you think about writing, a lot of the time they don't say like, or, this character felt this way, felt angry or whichever, but they're more like describing like what they look like or describing the feeling more so. So then the reader actually has to guess from those clues that are being given, or they're feeling angry. So it kind of tries to bring that body language more into the writing as well, rather than just saying like he felt angry. It's more like, the face got hot and reddened and, the heart started racing or,
That's right.
These kinds of things.
So how do we know how to interpret? And the receiver of that communication will be dependent on how aware they are and how what their lenses are, how much work they've done on themselves, so they can actually interpret the information. And a number of times I've had people say, Jason, you said this. So I said, no, I didn't just say this, I said this and this. So you know how people love having communication, they tell you just a little piece of what's happened and they don't tell you the whole context? That's because people love to communicate based on what is going to make them look better. Right? So I've had people had to get other people to bear witness to people communicating to me. And I'd say, hey, no, I said this, and this creates a very different context now, doesn't it? Right? So I've had people say, like, you told me I won't change. I said, well, I did say you won't change. That's true if you are not taking responsibility for your life and understanding what you need to do differently. You just missed that part out though, didn't you? And so people can, this is where the hook comes in with the child state stuff. If a person is in a huge amount of pain, then they will communicate from that pain and they'll only hear from the pain. So they'll only catch the dialogues that are based on the pain.
That makes sense, yeah.
Does that make sense? So how do you deliver information to someone like that? You can't. They will always take it out of context, and they will make some ridiculous story up that's not true. So the number of times I've been taken out of context as a leader, you said this, I'm like, well, what did you hear? What was the rest? Oh, I said this, and this. Oh, yeah, so you did.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, I've experienced these kinds of things as well, and it's interesting when you when you experience something with someone, and then that person tells someone else about the experience, and you're just like, this is not really how it happened. Or, you kind of like how you experience it differently, and how also they want to, make it look more exciting, or want to show themselves in a better light, and you're just like, I was there. It didn't look like that to me, but it just comes through. This is what happens conviction.
For ambulance officers. Filia. Ambulance officers know if 20 people saw the incident, there's 20 different accounts of what happened for the same incident.
Yeah, it was funny the other day. My partner and I, we went for a walk, and we almost got hit by a car on the sidewalk because somebody lost control of their car, and then we were both like really shocked. And we kept walking, and we were talking about the car, and I said, "Oh, the car was white," and he's like, "Oh no, the car was silver." And then we were both confused. We were like, "Who's right?" And we didn't know. Like I was like, "Oh, it could have been silver," and he's like, "Oh, it could have been white." So it's just like, it was in that moment we experienced the same situation, but even the color of the car, we were like, I'm not sure anymore.
That's right. So think about this, listeners. If you're a leader under duress, how do you communicate cleanly? Now, you've seen me in a mess and communicated really cleanly in my classes.
Yep. How do you do that?
Well, I'm doing my job, right? So when I'm actually communicating a point that's actually got, again, situational awareness, I take myself away from my own personal experiences because they're not important to the delivery of the content that I'm sharing. Most people can't do that. If they're in a shitty mood, they can actually deliver a shitty mood as a leader.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
And that can be very, very challenging. So you've got to be able to know how to be out of your personal world when you are sharing as a leader.
And just, like you say, I'm doing my job.
Yeah. So it's my job. So I can be in the biggest, funkiest, I woke up this morning, Anya and I had a conversation, and both of us were in tears this morning. Now, I didn't take that here. Did you know?
No. I mean, I did feel like you were a bit tired or something like that.
Yeah, I was a little bit tired. That was because I didn't get much sleep last night. That wasn't the emotion that was going on. But that was something that I didn't need to bring here. Because I had other things to do. And most people bring that, and I could have been upset and then taken it out on you and poured it all over you today and got disappointed in something, because this is what a lot of people do with their communication. I know a lot of people who are feeling hurt by something, and then they pour it in out of context to the next situation that's happening.
That's probably one of the reasons why when you work in certain environments you get a lot of cranky people, like when you work in retail, hospitality or something like that. Something happened to these people during their day, and then you're one of the if you work there, you're one of the people that they can let it out on.
And I'm always very conscious of that. I'm very mindful of treating anyone who is in any sort of service space really, really politely. And the number of times that this has happened, listeners, is that I would often, if I was at a restaurant, and I never do this as a complaint, I always do this as a I know people have hard times, so I don't bother as a complaint. But when I would get really, really good service from somebody, I would ask to see the manager. And the first thing that the manager was expecting was that I was going to give some really bad feedback. And to their surprise, I'd say, "Hey, Michelle served us so brilliantly tonight. I just want to let you know she made our night, everything that she did. She was amazing. I just want to let you know you have an absolute diamond right there." But the expectation was that they were going to get I'll go, here's another complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So why do we do that? Right? Why are we willing so easily to share what we're disgruntled by without providing the inputs that, as this has happened to me on even Facebook. I'd see someone I hadn't seen for ages and go, oh my God, I watch every single one of your lives, every single one. Not one like.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea that they'd ever watched anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not one like on any of my things. They don't have a ability to press the button to like it and tell me they watch them every single day and they love them and they're so appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I could be thinking, geez, no one takes any notice.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is one thing to know, hey, maybe I'm wasting my time. I remember a while ago I was thinking, God, I'm wasting my time with these lives. No one's actually liking them or commenting. And then I hear feedback and, oh yeah, I watch yours every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you share. Right? And
Isn't that funny?
yeah, it is. And so we don't know when people are not sharing this. And I know that this is a common thing. When I used to be in corporate, I'd leave organisations. I was an IT programmer and people would tell me how great I was when I left. They'd never tell me I was doing a great job when I was in the job.
Yeah, I experienced that before as well. With like customers and stuff, you're like, oh yeah, I'm leaving, and they're like, oh, you were always so nice. I'm like, oh, that's something new.
Yeah, that's right. And so we've got to know how to communicate in a really, really rounded way as a leader, and I think this is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you would recommend, or?
Look, I think it's really good to maybe read books around this, have a look at what leaders do, have a look at how leaders lead that you really admire.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that I really admire that I like to emulate off, who are really kind and caring as leaders. So I think you need to find people who you admire, that you think has something really special that they share, that you want to actually wonder, well, what do they do, and study them. There's a guy in the academy, his name's Eric, and he said to me, in every group call that he's on with me, he studies me.
Mm-hmm.
He studies everything that I do, how I language, why I'm languaging, and why I'm actually sharing the way I'm sharing.
That's really cool. So he's like the student of you in a way, like actually seeing like why does he do the things that he does. Yeah. And so if you see someone, study them, study how they do it, what's their language, how do they communicate, what's going on that gives them a certain perspective, how do they think. Research, study, figure it out, because people don't. We've got a leadership academy to teach you how to find out what's under the covers, and this is part of our model, is to teach people how to have the courage, model behaviour, have that wise, really good communication, and we teach that, and to communicate vulnerably and do it in a way that's healthy. But how do we do that in the world? You're not in our academy potentially if you're listening to this right now, so I suggest what you should do is make sure that you're being diligent and looking at the way that you're leading as a person, and if you don't like anything or you don't like some of the things, change them, or get some help to change them as well. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for this beautiful chat. That was really good, really insightful.
Great. Thank you so much, Filia.
And see you next time.
Okay.
Thanks so much for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate you, and we really appreciate your time, because time is so valuable. What we'd love you guys to do, if you like this podcast, if you could share it with your friends, and also our website address for the podcast is www.wellnessbreakthroughacademypodcast.com. Our website is www.wellnessbreakthroughacademy.com. We have a free Facebook group called Wellness Leadership Evolution, so search for that. I'd love it if you could add me as a friend on Facebook. I don't buy it, so add me as a friend, and if you want some help and you would really like some support from us in the Academy, jump in. We have a process. You can do a break-in call to connect in with us. We do small courses. We have lots of things that we share. So we'd love the opportunity to give
you a chance to change your life and turn it into a free one. You are one transformation away from change. Come and catch up.